What's something that someone said that made you instantly hate them? An Aquitaine said to me while at dinner at her house with my kids that I should put my wheelchair-bound daughter up for adoption because I needed to focus on my healthy child and not her care. I never spoke to her again. Holy crap, that's freaked up on so many levels. When I was serving in a restaurant, a woman once told me I should be shot for serving her a bagel that she said was stale. When I told the manager what she said, he spoke to her for about 5 minutes or so and then walked away. She waved me over and apologized, saying that she didn't mean I should be shot for serving it, she meant the chef should be shot. Oh, that's way better. I was fighting an MRSA infection, blood infection, etc. Dropped from 175 pounds to about 105 pounds. Went from very tan to white like a vampire. During that time, I had a PICC line in 4 times. It was heck. Years of only getting 2 hours of sleep at a time because I had to take my medicine every 4 hours. And it had to drip for 2. Painful. But the worst part was just watching your own body deteriorate. My dad comes downstairs, sees me taking my medicine in my PICC line and says, "Why even bother taking it? You're already dead." I finally managed to beat my infections, almost got my life back, and now we don't speak. My daughter was born with a cleft lip. We were living out of state and decided to take her to the hospital at our hometown. I asked my boss for a few days off so I could be with her and my wife for a pretty major surgery. Our daughter was only 3 months old at the time of the surgery. My boss said no, it's not our fault that she was born with a cleft lip. It was so unexpected I didn't know what to do. So I walked out of her office. After stewing about it at my desk for a few minutes, I went back and told her off. I got the time off. It's not like you need to be off for Christmas. You don't even have kids to spend time with. After I told our director I needed to request off when my maternal grandmother passed away in December and I wanted to go to her celebration of life with my mom. Hey, I just wanted to reach out to you and see how you've been doing over the years. I sell like makeup now. Let me know if you're interested. I'm actually angry because this has happened to me before. Ugh. I was standing outside my daughter's preschool waiting to take her in, talking to another mum. She was saying that her 3-year-old son had just learned to ride with no stabilizers. I said to him, "Wow, really, Riley? That's so clever." And another mum just pipes up that it's because he's a boy and they have much better physical coordination at that age, so it would only really be impressive if he'd learn to write or something instead. Dude, the kid is right there and you're saying his big achievement isn't that impressive. Totally unnecessary. The mum I was talking to was very diplomatic about it. She just said that his older sister had learned to ride the week before and he likes to keep up with her. But either way, they were all proud of him. I took the mature route of making faces behind her back when she butted back out. I'm a girl and my legs are pretty muscular. It never bothered me and I never felt like I was not feminine or pretty because of it. In middle school pay class, a girl asked me how my calves got so muscular, and I told her it was because I ran a lot. She then turned to her friend and said, "Wow, thank God I don't run. I don't want to end up like her," and then laughed and walked away. Like, actually, it sounds surreal when I type it, but it was exactly like those stupid cliche school bully movies. Thanks, butthole from school, because that one comment made me develop an inferiority complex about my legs to this day. One day I'll kick you in the head. That's so awful. You should be proud of your legs. I know so many girls who would kill to have muscular legs. A co-worker I have little to do with very proudly told me the story of how he got really drunk, then after smashing a beer bong he spewed on himself. So he jumped in his car to get some new clothes. He put a cool song on and was headbanging while not looking at the road. When he eventually stopped to look at where he was going, he realized he was on the wrong side of the road and a white SUV was half in the ditch to avoid a collision. He thought this was absolutely awesome and then bragged about how hungover he was the next day. I told him I think he's a freaking idiot and that he wouldn't be sitting here bragging if he collided with a car and killed some innocent kids or something. His response was to call me a soft cock, then scoff and walk away. Judging by his alcoholism, that soft cock comment is just projection. This hate was more of a process. Lots of details I'm fuzzy on because it's been a while. Just know that out of hundreds of people he supervised, not a one had anything good to say about him. One of my co-workers had a baby die. The girl was less than a year old. Her funeral was on a Tuesday around noon. This is a slow shift for any restaurant, so the shift leader let anyone we could spare leave for an hour to pay their respects at the funeral. Our supervisor came storming through, off that we were so understaffed. When we explained the situation, he screamed, "I don't care whose baby died. I didn't approve any time off. First of all, dude, we have 2 tables occupied. They're okay. Secondly, one of your employees is dealing with her baby's death. Frick you." Bro, just wow. That's the kind of butthole you usually only see in movies. The character that's literally just made for the audience to hate. I was offered my first teaching job in a district I dreamed of working in. When I called my then best friend to ask if she'd come in and help me set up my room, she spent the whole afternoon making negative comments about the public education system. The nail in the coffin was when she told me computers would be doing my job in the next 20 years anyway. It didn't necessarily make me hate her, and it wasn't that comment alone that did our friendship in. It was just one of those defining moments when I realized that at every positive point in my life she'd been there to either one-up me or cut me down. I had to get rid of a one-upping, belittling person who was once my best friend too. Turns out I wasn't giving myself enough credit, and I deserve better friends. I'm sure you have better friends now, too. My cousin, Chinese, and her white husband were visiting my family in our home. My cousin is helping my mom out in the kitchen and they start speaking in Chinese. The husband, sitting in the living room, says, "Honey, we are in America, we speak English here." My mom comes out, looks at him and says, "You're in my home and we speak whatever we want here. You can leave if it bothers you." "There's a cat in your driveway. Can I hit it with my car?" He then proceeded to try. Fortunately he missed, but he did land a permanent spot on my crap list. You don't have the right to complain about this because I went through it and had it worse than you did. Okay Janet, that's very sad and we all commend you for your strength or whatever, but right now this isn't about you, so while we appreciate your input, please kindly shove it up your butt again and spit it out to someone who gives a crap. Ah yes, the suffering Olympics, where everyone loses. Dude, I bet you don't even get P. The fuckhead next to me in music theory after we got our tests back and I got a 100 compared to his 30. The test was on clefs. Dude, I bet you don't even get a diploma. My ex-mill after my 4-year-old told me Nana says that if you didn't make daddy so mad he wouldn't have to beat you up all the time. Oh that's fricked. I'm so sorry. Glad you got out of there. I don't understand why he's getting so much attention. He's fine now. B. The dude got hit by a motorcycle while riding his bike to the local ice cream shop. We were in 8th grade, so I can understand the lack of logical thinking. But since it was my friend who got hit by a motorcycle and proceeded to involuntarily slide his face across the pavement, I was really pissed at the comment. My stepmother, my father's 3rd wife, proclaimed her undying love for my siblings and I the first few minutes we met. I knew then that she wasn't to be trusted. You don't truly love someone that quickly. She also in the same sentence demanded that we call her mom, because she loves us more than our actual mother. K. If you haven't accepted Jesus as your personal savior, you are still an alcoholic. That was over 10 years after I gave up drinking. I am now over 16 years without a drink. Congrats on your 16 years. Woman at work is complaining that because of a recent doctor appointment she's out the money she would normally use on groceries until next payday. She's telling her friend that she's super hungry and is wishing it was Friday, which was like 2 days later. Bad guy who obviously lives off his parents, drinks a case of Monster every day, and constantly complains chimes in with "whenever I don't have money I usually just eat at home, or bring something from home." Everyone goes silent as she replies, "I don't have any food at home." That's what I'm saying. The guy was at least 26. No one should have to choose food over going to the doctor. That's horrible. My cousin's husband heard me laugh for the first time and looked at my mom and said, "What is she? Retarded?" I was 6. They are still together and I always avoided him at the family functions I no longer attend. I don't know if this is better or worse, but at my grandmother's funeral my uncle, by marriage, told me that while I had been an ugly kid I had grown up into a sexy woman. During orientation, my dorm mate said about another student who was super socially awkward. Oh, that thing his friends might have overreacted by the 2 years after pretty much affirmed it. People who refer to other people using such dehumanizing terms such as it and that thing are horrible freaking people. Restaurant owner here. Dude, bro, cola rep came into my restaurant because we needed a pop soda gun installed. After talking to my wife for 20 minutes, I came over to sit down and catch the rest of the convo. I got greeted with a at last. Here comes the boss. My wife is the boss. We went with the other guy. My wife runs a makerspace. I'll cover the shop sometimes. I've had to explain to countless people that I'm just married to the owner. My name isn't on a single document. Are you that useless and incompetent because you're from X ethnicity? Source: my mom. To a random cab driver who was doing his best. Yeah, she isn't the most pleasant person. Not the first thing that made me hate her, and won't be the last. When I was starting work at a new job last fall, I immediately disliked a coworker. I was just getting to know her. We'll call her Lily, and I was expressing to her that another coworker, Jane, fake name, had told me we needed to perform a task. I couldn't remember Jane's name though, first week there, so I was trying to think how to describe her. Lily cut in and just said, "The ugly trailer trash lady." I was so shocked, I didn't know what to say. I was like, no, she has brown hair and glasses. Lily, yeah, no, that's her. She's trailer trash. I immediately hated her. Anyone that can describe someone else in such a way with no thought is just a shizzy person. And freak you, Lily. I've gotten to know Jane, and she's the sweetest, nicest person. She doesn't bend over backwards for you because you treat her like garbage. She is so nice and easy to work with if you just treat her like a person. Went on a date with a pretty good looking guy back in the day. Everything seemed to go well. Pretty standard. Went to grab a drink and chatted for a while and genuinely had a good time. No more than 5 minutes after we said our goodbyes I get a text saying, "I thought I was going to hate your personality but actually it's not that bad." His on the other hand. One time I threw a rock at a cat and it hit it in the head and it died. And then he laughed. Yeah, I'm not going to associate with someone who gets enjoyment out of hurting killing animals for laughs. Sick bastard. This reminds me a while back when I overheard some people talking. They were all bragging about the cruelest things they've done to animals. One of them said they were testing various explosives on the neighborhood cats. He laughed as he said that one of them literally became an explosion of red and brown fur. I almost threw up and cursed them out. You are an idiot and I hope you never get a real job. Some lady at my cafe after I told her she was 6 cents short on her card. I was too broke to buy something and embarrassed myself. I'd better insult the cashier to try and bring her down too. I don't get people. You have the dumbest laugh I've ever heard. Besides giving me a complex about freaking laughing, all positive feelings I had toward a guy disappeared instantly. What a terrible thing to say. The worst thing you can make fun of is someone's laugh, making a mockery of their happiest moments. First time I met this guy, let's call him a chat, was at a deaf social. I had been learning ASL for almost 7 years at this point, so I have a pretty good grasp on the language. I start talking to a chat, since he went to the same university I did. He laughed, fairly obnoxiously, at everything I signed. The one line that killed me was, "I'm not laughing at you, I swear. It's just that you're signing everything wrong." He tried to go on to correct signs that I had learned from my deaf prof and several other deaf people in the community. He was in my class the following semester. He remembered me. "Oh, you're the girl that signed what's wrong. You used the word said. I remember you." Luckily, he sucked at ASL, so I took every opportunity to make him feel as stupid as possible. He deserved it. Our huge extended family got together over dim sum for Lunar New Year the other day, and my seldom seen aunt brought along her husband. I've never met him before, so I approach him to introduce myself and welcome him, but he's already talking to one of my great uncles. He starts going on about how the Chinese are Marfan, troublesome, annoying. I give him the benefit of the doubt and ask why. He has the balls to matter-of-factly say, "Because you guys don't speak English well." You're in an English speaking country. You need to learn English. When I go to China, I speak Chinese. No one is going to speak to you in Chinese here. You all should honestly go back to China. It took everything for me to not express the anger and sadness I was feeling for Aunt, who seemed to not understand how insulting he was being. I honestly don't know how he could mention my family's English speaking abilities when he could only utter 5 words max of barely understandable Chinese. What a shithead. Hope your new year is off to a great start otherwise. When my mother told me that I was just asking to be raped by my uncle because I fell asleep on his couch, because he is a desperate man and needs sex. What the actual frick? Oh, women who don't breastfeed their children are just lazy, and it's really a form of child abuse. This was said 2 weeks after I had come to terms with the fact that I physically could not breastfeed my child, and so was formula feeding my child right in front of her. Yep, she no longer exists in my life. ETA. Ouch, my inbox. That bit of levity aside, this comment hit at a painful part in my life, and made me realize the mommy wars have to stop. Whether you formula feed exclusively, breastfeed exclusively, supplement one with the other, fed is best. Whatever you are doing, mama and papa, you are doing great. When I was 11, my kitten died after I begged my ex-stepdad to take her to the vet because she looked ill, super cloudy eyes, wasn't eating, was walking funny, etc. His mother broke the news to me when she picked me up from summer camp. When I cried, she laughed hysterically and said all of this over some cat. What the frick? Ex-stepdad, his mother, I'm glad those people are no longer in your life. It was my first week of college. I had just finished attending one of those mandatory orientation meetings. The presentation was about plagiarism and was given by one of the English professors. I was really impressed by her. Somehow she even made a plagiarism lecture sound interesting. It's important to note that she had a slight lisp. It did not affect the clarity of her speech at all. The next day I was at a mixer event and one of the guys in the group I was talking with started to talk about the presentation. At first I was interested, then he mentioned what he put on his evaluation form: go see a speech therapist. I was astounded by the immaturity. Instead of saying anything to do with the presentation itself, or just saying nothing at all, he decided to rudely point out an aesthetic aspect that I'm pretty sure she's well aware of anyways. I've had other interactions with this guy since and they've only ever reinforced my initial impression that he is a jerk. I feel her pain. I have a slight lisp. And there's a couple of buttholes at school that will start mocking me for it, and then everyone just thinks it's fine to join in. It makes my blood boil. People that brag about how they drive drunk. You're not being impressive. You're literally bragging about being an idiot and risking other people's lives. They clearly don't care about their own life, but why disregard all the other people that genuinely want to keep living? All the names have been changed. Quick background. I have worked for Unknown Mike for many years. He was his army combat vet and I consider him a good friend. Both of us are in a veteran motorcycle organization that helps disabled vets. We donate mobility chairs and help them pay their bills. If anyone is interested, message me and I'll give you a link to our website. I started work at a small company that produced fire suppression systems. It was so small that the managers were brothers. Let's call them Jim and Lee. Jim was a felon and Lee was just jackass. Everyone had some sort of connection before they got hired. Even me. Mike got hired because he sold a gun to one of the office people and Mike got me hired. I started in the shipping area. We got daily delivery and pickups from multiple companies. On one instance an older black man jumped out of his truck and Lee right off the back make a comment claiming that he was one dark Enger. I said, hey bro, you can't say that. That's quite disrespectful. He shrugged and laughed. On and on he made comments about race and me being a big guy, fat and slow. Quite frequently we pick up boxes that weight well over 75 pounds. Boxes of brass are heavy. Mike hurt himself lifting and was on work restriction. Everyone except me turned a cold shoulder towards him. It was the day 2 days before Veterans Day and Mike asked if we had it off. Later Mike had to leave for a doctor's appointment and I asked Lee if we worked Veterans Day. He responded, yeah, who cares about veterans? We also work King Enger's Day. I stopped working, turned to his brother Jim, who was standing behind us the whole time and look at him to see if he would say anything. Jim shrugged his shoulders and smirked. I looked back at Lee and asked, what the frick did you just say? I stood up and walked away to stop myself from going off on him. I went to find our HR lady, but she was out of the office for a bit. So I talked to the owner's wife, who coincidentally was friends with my aunt, and she then told her husband, the owner, and made Lee apologize. Lee tried to apologize by saying, I'm sorry, you can take it like a man or leave it. I told the owner how he apologized and Lee was sent home. The owner asked to talk to Mike outside to figure out how they are going to solve it. That's when Lee jumped in his car and did a massive burnout while he was leaving. 2 days later, Mike was fired because we were overstaffed. So I walked up to HR, told them they should have fired me. Mike and I were doing the same job, but Mike was there long and did the job more effectively. Told them they made the wrong choice and walked out. My first job I ever had was cashiering at a Walgreens. I was a senior in high school and was robbed at gunpoint one night. Obviously got very shaken up and my mom made me take a day off school and go talk to a counselor about it. First day back in school, this kid who I already didn't really like walked up to me and thought it would be hilarious to say, haha, you got robbed, like 2 goddamn days after it happened. That's not even a clever thing to say as a bully, it's just a statement. There was a kid in elementary school who nobody liked, but I was friendly with him. He was a dong to me in high school, but I ignored it. He ended up working at the same retail place as me out of high school, and showed up at a party my work friends were having. I had just found out I got accepted to veterinary medical school that day, and I was super stoked about it. Somebody asked me what was new while he was in earshot and I excitedly told them. He pipes up, yeah, but you won't be a real doctor though. It was just hurtful, and at that point I completely gave up on giving him the benefit of the doubt. And showed up at a party my work friends were having. One wonders who invited him if he's such a douche. What is the most offensive thing a customer has ever said to you? A guy came up to the register and ordered a cheeseburger. You can't mess that up, right? Well, I take his money, give him his change, and a minute later his cheeseburger. A few seconds after I hand him the cheeseburger, he looks at me and goes, you stupid inbreed piece of crap, I wanted a Big Mac. I was 16 at the time and was horrified that a grown man would shout at a freaking kid over something that was not my fault. My manager came over and ripped this guy a new one for being so stupid. When I worked in a call center doing tech support. 1. Go frick yourself. 2. So you close in a few minutes? Me. Yes, we do. How do you get home? Me. I take the train. Well, I'm going to keep you on the phone until you miss your train. They failed. Hello, hello, sorry I can't hear you. Click. This guy was trying to get insurance information from his ex-wife over the phone. I was new to the pharmacy and didn't realize I could get it off of her profile. She, not realizing she's on speakerphone, said, what kind of freaking idiots do they have working there? Everybody in the store heard her say it. The guy saw how embarrassed I was, looked at me saying, that's why she's my ex-wife. I worked in retail and would often get shoplifters, but we couldn't do much other than follow them around, and if we saw them put something in their purse bag pocket, offer to place that item at the cash register for them. We technically couldn't accuse them of shoplifting because if they dropped the item and no longer had it, they could sue the company for false accusations. Really messed up considering it was a Fortune 500 lingerie company. Anyhow, one day I came out from the back and walked into a situation where a frequent shoplifter was having a standoff with my boss, accused my boss of being racist and then threw cookies at her. Yes, cookies. It was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever witnessed, other than the time I caught a man shoving about 8 bottles of perfume down his pants. Excuse me, sir. Can I offer you a shopping tote for those perfumes? I see they must be your favorite. Can I interest you in our store card? Yeah, I don't miss that job. There was a big line at my work and only 2 of us working, so I ended up being the only one on cash with a huge line. I was going fairly quickly and still being cheerful, so I thought I was doing fine. Then this woman about 2 customers back says, loudly, this Ray girl shouldn't be allowed to be on till alone if she is going to be that slow. Also, she said this to her 8-year-old daughter. I feel sorry for the daughter who's going to grow up thinking this kind of behavior is acceptable and learn the hard way that it's very much not. What a dong. I used to work at Best Buy and my first week on the job we were getting ready close up and every other cashier decided it was time to go dong off, so I'm stuck with a line of at least 6 deep. A couple walks up with a TV, PS3, several games etc. Obviously the total was a couple thousand. Tell them the price, let's say $2,000. They proceed to sit there and try to haggle with me. Then the wife, who had to be 60, called me a crap stain on society among other things. I guess she thought I set the prices. People seem to think retail is an environment where haggling is acceptable. Gone are the days of the independent shop owners. My rule as a customer: when another customer is rude, I defend the clerk vehemently. Clerks worry about their jobs. Customer is always right and crap like that and are therefore easy victims for bully customers. I do not have that restriction and am happy to say what the clerk would, if he or she could. Let's all make the world a better place. I'm going to the supermarket right now to pick fights with other customers. I worked as a customer service rep at a cell phone company in college and would hear terrible things all the time, but the worst would have to be when I heard a man literally almost beat his wife to death. She was the account owner and had not authorized him to access it. They must have been having a pretty heated argument already because he was calling in to disconnect her line. She wouldn't give authorization, so, in response, he began to beat her. It was the most awful thing I have ever heard. I could hear each time he made contact and the sounds she made still haunt me when I think about them. I hit trace on my phone, muted and waved my supervisor over. She and I were able to get the police to their home in a matter of minutes, but it felt like an eternity because there was nothing I could do except wait. The police finally arrive and contain him. I hear the paramedics asking her questions but I don't hear any responses. Against my choice, I had to hang up, note the account and move on with my shift, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I spent the next month thinking about her, hoping that she was fine before I finally accepted the fact I would never know. But one day when I came into work, I had a letter on my desk. The letter was from her. I don't even know how to explain how relieved I felt seeing her name as the return address. She wrote about how she was in the hospital for 2 weeks from her injuries. She is happily in the process of divorce and the husband is now in jail. She had called in after getting home to try and find the girl that saved her life. I am glad we were required to note every account or my name would have been lost and I would probably still be wondering years later. I used to work at the infamous Ponderosa buffet as a line cook. Fun fact, you can actually order meals there other than buffet, please. So with these so-called meals, you get choice of side, either French fries or baked potatoes. One day we got slammed with business and completely ran out of baked potatoes and had some in the oven starting to cook. In walks the customer. He stands at an ample 6'4". He's a wide man, clad in denim and full of beefy desire in his heart. His mustache, thicker than Sam Elliott's. This is an American man made by and for his time. His lips part, and out come the words, buffet and Arabi. The host begins to speak, but is shut down. With the baked potato, we currently are all out of potato. We can offer you. The man's face turns a shade of fuchsia not even Crayola could name. His eyes bulge, his lips tighten. The air blowing in and out of his mouth creates a rippling tornado of absolute fury around him. No potatoes. No potatoes. He moves faster than anyone of his girth should and ever has since. He pokes his angry face back into the kitchen. No potatoes. What's going on at Ponderosa? No potatoes. You should be fired, he proclaimed, waving a finger at me. His family had to pull him back to the front desk, him still hollering. He accepted the sad terms we had to give him. French fries. The kitchen was on the other side of the wall from the buffet line, so I walked around to see him eating his steak. He just ate it with pure spite. I've never seen anyone mow on a buttered well-cooked steak with just pure hatred. He didn't even enjoy the buffet. He just sighed when he had to pick up the tong spoon ladle like it wasn't enough. There will always be a baked potato-shaped hole in that fat man's heart. I work at Zellers as a cashier. One day a few months back I have this lady come through my till. She sounded Russian, and so I rang her through. When she started complaining about a can of Heinz beans, I told her that the price was correct, and she argued. I remained calm and then wham, next thing I know I wake up in the first aid room. Apparently, she was so upset she had pitched the can at my head and hit me hard enough to knock me out. I have a very husky voice, and one day when I was working in a petrol station, this dirty old man said to me, "Ooh, that sounds sore. I have something you can suck on." I was a baby-faced 19 at the time, so I told him I was 15. I've never seen anyone turn pale and run away so quickly before. Obviously he had one of those gummy bear lozenges for you, but once you told him you were 15 he realized you were far too old for them and left because he was so embarrassed of his gaffe. I worked at the paint department at Lowe's, and one time an older black couple said I was making them wait because they were black, even though they were behind 3 people I was helping. I asked them how could they possibly think that, and they said, "Your ears turned red when you talked to us. That's how we know you're racist. WTF. This is why I style my hair to cover my ears. Then no one will ever know my true thoughts." I've collected some pretty fricked up stories, but as far as offensive, I was working my store service desk when this dirty, literally dirty, old guy walks up with some opened light bulbs. He's muttering to himself for a minute or so before telling me that he wants to return them. Naturally, he has no receipt. Now, we're not supposed to do anything with opened bulbs, but I told him that he could replace them if he wanted. He told me our return policy was communism before taking the bulbs and shambling away, muttering to himself. I honestly didn't think he'd come back. About an hour later, he comes back with the bulbs and a half dozen cans of cat food off the shelves. He scowled at me and asked if what he had was good enough. I told him that, again, all I could do was replace the bulbs. He yelled, "Well, you can keep the son of a b and stick it up your butt," and proceeded to throw all of the items at me. I've been called a lot of things and had various items thrown at me, but this is still the only time I've been told to stick stuff up my butt. He missed, by the way. Elderly man told me I should be taken out back and shot. Apparently not having a specific brand of milk is a pretty big deal. Woman walks up to my register with her 2-year-old, orders a drink. 2-year-old reaches into our tip jar and pulls out a quarter. I protest. Mother responds, "It's just a quarter. I give you people too much already anyway." Mother and daughter turn and leave. Take drink. Pour some out. "Sorry, I gave you too much." My first job was as a waitress, and I had a particularly surly old man one day that spent the duration of his meal insulting me, asked me to turn around for him, criticized the way I styled my hair, and overall just gave me a hard time about every little thing. He left without giving me much of a tip, even though I tried my best to remain polite and professional. The lady sitting at the table beside me noticed how rude he was and went out of her way to compliment me and left me a $20 tip on a $40 bill. It was probably my first real life encounter when I realized that despite the grumps in the world, there are people out there that show genuine sincerity and kindness to strangers. "No, I mean your real name," said by a customer after I told him my name is Joe. "I'm Asian. Joe is my legal first name." Almost said ching chang chong to her. Was in a store and overheard a little girl asking her mom to buy some cookie dough in a tube. The mother exclaimed, "You don't want that. It'll give you cancer. Can't you smell the cancer?" She then proceeded to allow her daughter to smell the dough so she could experience the scent of cancer. Worst thing I had ever heard an adult tell a child. I can't imagine what cancer would smell like if it had a smell. Probably something like a really eggy fart. My friend and I were next in line at the concession counter of a movie theater, and the customer in front of us was being an absolute prick to the young girl working behind the counter for no apparent reason, except that he was just a flaming butthole. She was so flustered and nervous that she was shaking. It was very sad to watch. So I began to comment very loudly to my friend something like, "Look at this freaking guy, picking on a teenage girl." So he looks back as if he is going to lay into me and sees 2 big guys staring him down. He quickly flips back around and stares at the counter. I then say something to the effect of, "You know, people like this deserve to have the freaking crap beaten out of them. I hate freaking pee." My friend made some comment in agreement with my sentiment. Mr. Butthole became visibly nervous. It was a glorious turn of events. I felt like I had made the world a little better place that night. Thank you for being there for that poor girl. When I was working at McDonald's, a guy once came in to promote the new church cafe he had opened. He went on about how they did mainly lunches and whatnot for the poor. Then he says, I assume since you work at McDonald's you must be really poor or not all there. The girl in the drive-thru and I just stood there staring at him until his meal came up and he left. And that's how you get scabs mixed in with your ketchup. I work in a bookshop, usually in the children's department. I'm a guy. A few days ago a woman asked me where all the girls who run the department are, because I shouldn't be allowed to work in it. When I asked why, she responded, because you're a man. You could be a pedophile. She was a woman, and definitely a C. Sort of along the lines. I was working at Future Shop over Christmas a few years back. Mom and son come in, she's getting his present early and would like me to help her out with the best deals, games etc because she doesn't know anything about it. So I'm showing her the GBASPs, the features, the games etc. She's really nice, appreciates the help etc. The kid is about 16 or so, and every time the mom asks me a question, he gets all impatient and says, God mom, I already told you all of this. Frick. She doesn't say anything, so I just ignore him. His attitude the entire time was so ridiculous. She's in Teha buying him over $200 worth of stuff, wants to know about what she's buying, and he's being a complete dong to her the entire time. Finally, after about 20 minutes of this, I said something about the service plan. She says she always gets it on things like this, and the kid says which is fricking Ray and I snapped. I said straight to his face, good lord kid. Your mom is here buying you all this stuff and this is how you treat her? And by the way, it's not retarded. My brother is retarded and is a million times more grateful than you for every little things he gets. Grow up. He looked at me stunned. The mom looked at me like wow, that was great. Kid finally musters up, don't buy from this B. Mom says, are you kidding me? I'm buying everything from her from now on. She ended up spending the $200 plus on herself. Not a customer, but a student once said that they hoped I got in a car crash on my way home, and that my family dies in a fire. I love my job. Had a guy once tell me that he hopes my brother, who had just got shipped out to Afghanistan, gets shot and dies. I beat his butt. I worked in a movie theater back in the day, and when I told a very elderly man how much his popcorn and soda cost, he immediately erupted into a verbal blitzkrieg which basically accused me of being a raging anti-Semitic. Granted it was expensive as frick, but he was literally claiming I was making up different prices for different creeds. He even brought Palestine into it. Plus he was the perfect distance from the other customers' earshot, so when they all looked over, it probably looked like I was oppressing this poor old man. It's like, come on, man. You look like an old bag of skin, I can't even tell what you are. Besides, don't feel special. We're robbing everyone. Comma, you look like an old bag of skin, I can't even tell what you are. That is beautiful. Best retail story: when I was at Target, the girl I was working with in electronics was ringing up a snobby 30-something with her 6-ish-year-old daughter. They obviously came from money based on what they were wearing. The mom says to the daughter, see baby, this is why you have to stay in school. You don't want to work at Target like this girl. Without hesitation, the girl I worked with, who was only 20 at the time, turned to the daughter and said, actually I am working here to help pay my nursing school tuition. I work 30 hours a week and go to school on top of that. Your mom is right though. You don't want to work in retail because you have to put up with ridiculous be like your mother. Epic. I would never have the balls to say something like that, and was especially moved because I was only working at Target because my economics BA hadn't gotten me a real job in the 6 months since I received my diploma. Now I have a real job in banking. If you work in any kind of retail supermarket store, then you are a verbal punching bag for old bastards or young idiots. We get a lot of rich stay-at-home mothers come in with their babies at my job, and one of them was all like, see, you want to go to school and do well with education, or you could end up like that man, me, over there. I was just about to stutter about my degree when some young fella walks by giving zero fricks and says, hey lady, not all of us can frick our way up the food chain. Maybe taking a job like this would help take that silver spoon out your mouth and give you an insight into a day's hard work. Hero. What's the most sheltered thing you ever heard from someone? I was visiting relatives out of town. The easiest route back home was to travel some backcountry roads instead of the highway. As I was leaving, I told my aunt that I thought I would stop at a farm stand and pick up some fresh corn. My 25-year-old cousin piped in, "Corn? Don't be stupid. Corn comes from the supermarket." I waited for her to laugh. She didn't. She was serious. As I was leaving, I heard my aunt explaining how supermarkets work. I am going to blame your aunt for that one. I have a friend from Egypt whose parents are super controlling. When he moved to the States without them, his dad set up security cameras outside his house. We were hanging out after work, only until like 6 or 7 p.m. And his dad called freaking out because his car wasn't in the driveway yet. He is 28 years old. Good God. I was ushering my class outside for field day, and everybody is joking and having a good time, when suddenly I hear "you dildo." I pull the culprit aside and ask them if they knew what they were saying. They said they didn't know what the word meant, and I believed them. A lot of kids that age parrot what they hear without understanding the meaning. So, not wanting to ruin the kids' day, I talked to them about not using words we're unsure about, and had him sit out of the first 2 activities. No biggie. Problem solved. We're having fun with the class when the principal walks up. The principal had been talking with the kid and asked me why the kid was sitting out. I explained the situation, but the principal still didn't understand what the problem was. The principal thought dildo was referring to an armadillo. Yup, I awkwardly explained what a dildo was to my principal. He probably heard it from South Park. I remember calling my mom a dildo at a family Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody laughed at me, never said it again. My old roommate brought over a girl he was dating one summer day. I was outside mowing the lawn when they pulled into the driveway and they walked over for a quick introduction. The first thing she said was, "What are you doing?" I thought it was just like a rhetorical question, so I just responded with, "Haha, yeah, it's pretty hot out today." But then she asked again, so I said, "You know, just mowing the lawn." She was really nice and everything, but the look on her face was like when you explain something to a kid and they say, "Oh okay," but on the inside they're trying to wrap their head around this crazy new information you've just given them. My ex and his family were confused to find out that I kept my pet cat inside and not tied to a tree in my backyard. They even offered to buy me supplies to do so. They couldn't understand why I would ever let anything like that live in my house. I once heard a mother confront her 4 boys, all of them between the ages of 10-17, about the fact that they wandered off from her and that they were sitting ducks without her around. I felt so sorry for those boys. Also, they were dressed in identical white turtleneck sweaters and khakis. Intern at my office seemed surprised to find me washing my coffee mug in the break room. Seemed to think it was almost absurd that I would do this instead of using a paper cup. Me: "Oh, you don't like washing dishes? Well, what about at home?" Intern: "I don't wash dishes." Me: "What about at home?" Intern: "I never wash dishes." Me: "Ever?" Intern: "I always have female roommates." Me: "Oh." Intern: "And before that my mom did all my dishes." Rich girl I dated in college. Her: "My washing machine is still broken. What am I supposed to do if the apartments don't fix it before I run out of clothes?" Me: "Do them at a laundromat." Her: "Those aren't real." Me: "What? What do you mean?" Her: "Those are just something in old movies." So I drove her to a laundromat that was a few blocks away from her house. She laughed. I laughed at her and quietly wondered what I was doing with her. A few days later she asked me, "Why do they even call it olive oil? There aren't even any olives in it." Not the brightest girl ever, but she actually was very fun to be around. I said, "Pretend you got no money." She just laughed and said, "You're so funny." Not something they said, but I had a homeschooled friend whose father completely controlled him and didn't allow him to have real life friends. He controlled who he talked to when playing online video games. Our fathers worked together, and eventually we became friends playing games online together. At one point our parents agreed we should meet up and hang out in real life. First time he came over I wanted to show him my computer in my basement, both of us around 12. I head down the stairs and turn back to see he didn't follow me, then plumps his butt on the stairs and does that all the way down the flight of stairs. Over about our 2-year friendship this never changed. Still talk to him via Steam but no idea if he is still this way. Oh god, my mom made me do that up until I was a teenager because my cousin bumped her head on the stairs once, not even falling down the stairs. We also had to climb up on all fours. I'm still afraid of stairs to this day cause I was taught to be since forever. A few years ago at uni UK I was sitting in the dorm kitchen minding my own business and my flatmate was doing something or other on the counters behind me, when suddenly I hear a shrill squeak shout. I thought she had cut herself with a knife. Nope. She was jumping up and down in excitement, holding a piece of bread, toast. I asks what's up, slightly confused about the toast hoovering proudly in front of my face. Turns out she just buttered her first slice of bread herself. 20 years old, India, Kenya. She used to have servants. That's kind of adorable. Working in India. Got a co-worker who is clearly from some wealthy family in the States. Lots of issues but one that sums it up well as he believes the sandwich shop in the cafeteria hooks him up. No Greg, there aren't lines or order here. You have to pay after you get your food. You are just taking the food and not paying. No random Indian who has never spoken to you is so enthralled with your charm as to give you free food all the time. He just has no real recourse to complain as he is paid probably around $5 a day and doesn't feel comfortable complaining about a white employee who makes more than 80% of the people in the 14 FLR building. Start paying the freaking 35 rupees for breakfast, you crap. It is like 50 cents. My mother was raised in a massively sheltered Baptist household in North Carolina. She's the sweetest human being in the world but she just doesn't know like anything about basic history or pop culture. We were playing a game of Pictionary and I had to go head to head with her in drawings use. I proceed to draw a bearded man in a toga with lighting coming out of his hands. She draws some sort of weird centaur looking abomination and obviously lost the round. Afterwards, we were all laughing at her drawing and she's like, "Who is Zeus?" I'm like, "Mom, he is like the most well-known Greek god. He's in a Disney movie." Then she says, "Oh, I never got into that atheist stuff." OHH, I'm sorry, I don't speak hip hop. My ex went to Bible college. Her roommate was part of a I'm Not Doing It group that performed vague skits about abstinence. She was kicked out because the baby bump she had became pretty obvious. Her boyfriend insisted they never did it. They eventually found out that she let her previous boyfriend do things that she didn't understand. Those two had a shotgun wedding days before the baby was born. Her mother had told her babies come from semen and being from Nebraska she was far from any sailors. I wish that last sentence was a joke. Had a South African roommate for 2 weeks. First thing she said to my roommate, who was wearing innocuous and rather plain clothing, "Oh, that looks like something my maid would wear." Cue 2 miserable weeks of my roommate and I teaching this girl how to do the most basic tasks, like making her bed, folding laundry, and sweeping a floor. Everything we taught her was hesitantly punctuated by infuriating comments like, "Back home I don't have to do this. Back home my maid does this. How did you ever grow up without help? Why doesn't the school just hire a cleaning service to do our laundry for us?" I got passive aggressive really fast. Thank God my roommate had the patience to deal with this girl until she flew back home. The real world was just too harsh for her. Her words, not mine. I roll. My ex's mother loved to scold her about premarital sex regularly. One thing that stood out was when she told me that women's vaginas mold to the penis of the first guy they have sex with. And that's why premarital sex is frowned upon, because if they sleep with someone other than their future husband before marriage, the penis won't fit properly. This comment wins for being the most sheltered crazy thing I've read here. I have a teenage online friend from Pakistan. One day I tell him I was just washing dishes and he says, Why don't you have your servant do it?" Apparently, even middle class people in Pakistan often have multiple servants. Usually the kind of people who are illiterate and unable to do any other kind of work. Or so he says. And he was absolutely baffled that not everyone who was anything above dirt poor had servants to do their dishes. Same in India. Most middle class family hires a maid for daily chores. I have a friend from a super wealthy background who doesn't really understand things like frugality because he's never had to be frugal himself. And he seems genuinely surprised by people who live less extravagantly than he does. It's all "this is the lifestyle I like," which is basically expensive whining and dining all the time. Like he's entitled to live a life of leisure without working hard in order to afford that lifestyle. He's one of those people who just pisses away money and expects people to give him money when he hasn't got any himself. He's had jobs here and there and he actually has a bachelor's degree too. But he's never not had his parents paying his rent for him and giving him an allowance, and seems to have zero desire for any kind of career. He's 27. So some huge number of wealthy families, 75% or something, lose their money within 3 generations. This will be one of them. My old roommate and I about a year ago were joking around about how female roommates use more toilet paper, and he started to get genuinely annoyed. He started saying stuff like, what the frick? Why do they use so much more? I don't get it at all. It's just rude. Had to explain to this 28 years old that women generally wipe when they pee. Mind we also use like 12x more toilet paper during our periods. My downstairs neighbors are a 60-ish-year-old woman and her 30-something-year-old daughter who has always lived with her. The older lady is extremely religious, as in, on a Carrie's mom from Carrie level. The daughter has never lived away from her, has never had a job, has never been on a date, has never used the internet, etc. One day, when her mom was napping, the daughter came outside when I was working in the complex's shared garden. She asked me if she could ask me a potentially embarrassing question. I said sure. She asked me what men look like with their clothes off. I sort of sputtered for a moment and asked if she really wanted to know. Note, look at my username before you assume I'm a man who took her to my place and showed her my junk. She said yes. I pulled out my phone and googled a picture of a hot muscular naked guy and showed it to her. Her eyes just got really big. She said thank you, and she went back inside. Thanks you Angelina Bobina, another girl in this world that would be surely disappointed in my naked body. There was a guy at my college who had scars all over his face, head, and neck from being burned in a fire. I overheard a young woman walk up to him and say, "You must have really sinned a lot for God to hurt you like that. Your parents must have also sinned quite a bit to have such a douchebaggy, cunty daughter." He was adopted at birth from Guatemala into an upper middle class family. He didn't realize he was not from the US and thought Canada was a separate continent. That was a fun day when we found out how little Eric knew about the world. Luckily he was just 15 and actually willing to learn after being laughed at a bit. My mum is remarkably naive about certain things, perhaps partly a product of her pastor's daughter upbringing. There was a thing on the news about people wanting to marry their animals. My brother pointed out that it seemed an odd paradox, that someone would be so unconventional they were into bestiality but traditional enough to value marriage. He joked, "You can just imagine the conversation. Sorry donkey, no sex before marriage, we'll just have to stick to heavy petting." My mum and I laughed, and then my mum, making it very clear she had no idea what heavy petting was, said, "I suppose donkeys are quite heavy pets." That was a solid pun. Guy I know was talking about how New York City was the worst place he'd ever been to. He'd been to the LaGuardia airport. His connecting flight to Aruba was delayed overnight. This was the one time he's been to New York City. From someone who grew up about an hour away from London, are there more than 2 train stations in London? Same person said you could wear me as a hat and didn't understand why everyone found it funny. She also hadn't even seen a photograph of a penis until she was 20 and didn't know if the balls were above or below the penis. Her parents wouldn't let her see her friends unless a Christian went with her because her dad didn't trust people who aren't Christians. In England this basically means he can't trust about 5 people under the age of 30. I guess it's not really extreme, but I work with a 22 and a 21-year-old whose parents still check movie ratings and violence involved in the movies to make sure it's okay for them to go see. They tag along for most of the movies. I think that's pretty extreme, considering by that age you no longer have to have a parent or guardian with you to purchase a ticket. Pakistani friend online asked me to explain what sex is. He meant what the difference was between males and females. He was horrified that I had suggested pitting a part of his body, especially one so private and reserved for Allah. Still not sure what he meant by that, into another person. I eventually learned that he was not aware females had periods either. After explaining that one to him, He vowed I shall always be nice to women, especially when they are being B. Now that I know it comes from the hurt inside, and decided the cost of chocolate was not so unreasonable, considering what it is good for, soothing females on their periods. I'm calling my period the hurt inside from now on. Stories from this girl are more or less how I have all my karma. Here are a few pearls of nonsense that have flopped out of her face. It's not sex if he uses a condom. I had anorexia. When I had flu I didn't eat for like 2 days. I'm allergic to sugar. She lives off bread and drinks neat vodka regularly because it's not overly sweet so it doesn't have sugar in. She would also insist on eating some cake or fruit I was eating and then make gagging noises and say how awful it was. I think you're confusing sheltered with mentally ill. My best friend said that she wished she didn't get so much stuff for Christmas and that she's tired of getting David Yaman rings. Not too bad though. Also, my other best friend just turned 20 but she told everyone she was 19 because she was scared to be an adult. Both girls still live with their parents. Love them though. I mean, I can see not wanting as much stuff for Christmas if it is just very expensive stuff you don't care about and rather see the money spent on something with a purpose. My sister's housemate is from Cambridge. When I went to stay with them I got to see her try and make breakfast. She couldn't work a toaster. She didn't understand pre-sliced bread. She couldn't crack an egg. She woke me up to crack eggs for her, which she then didn't know how to scramble. She asked where the olive oil was, because she wanted olive oil for her toast. Alzari olive oil, which is around £3 for 100 milliliters. We only had Asda's own, and when I told her to use that, she lay down on the floor and sobbed that she just couldn't take it anymore. You know, for a Scottish person your English is very good. I replied, thank you. It took time, a lot of, but I think it off-paid. I was a very poor kid with a scholarship to one of the richest if not the richest high schools in the city. I have quite a few gems. The first is this one boy whose dad owns about 15 Ferraris was talking to me about life after school. He was 17/18 at the time, and I said I wanted a studio apartment. He thought it was a whole floor to yourself. When I explained it was just one room, he was confused for a long while. Thought I was making things up, and when he eventually accepted it said, why would you want to live in something like that? It's pretty much a jail cell, isn't it? I can't believe poor people live like that. Do poor people really live like that? I went on to explain to him that actually poor people are a lot worse off. You still need quite a bit of money and a solid savings and income for a studio apt. For some reason he thought the smart thing to spew out of his mouth was, you know, I heard when poor people feel sad about being poor, they watch documentaries on Africa and stuff like that. Maybe you should try that sometime. He was genuinely 100% serious and thought it was good advice. All I could say was thanks JXXX. I'll try that next time. There was also the time I was stuck in a global politics class where no one knew what welfare the dole was, the teacher explained. And everyone was outraged because why should lazy poor people get their money that they worked hard for? How dare they not work for it like rich people had to? My family was on welfare at the time. Both my parents were made redundant around the same time just because budget cuts. I was 15 and the only one in a house of 6 people with a job. Welfare helped us eat. It took all my strength not to break down in tears during that class, indirectly hearing that I'm scum and don't deserve to eat pretty much. They'll do anything to show off how they donated $20 to a charity in Africa, and rave on and on about third world countries. But when it comes to fixing our own they don't say a word, or they criticize the less fortunate because their money is more important than the people. My sister's boyfriend's mother wasn't aware he was having sex until she found his condoms in his wastebasket. At 24 years old, she also refused to believe that my sister and him slept in the same bed at night. Mothers like this are the funniest. Regarding a rapper that got murdered by former gang associates, why didn't he just move to a gated community after he got rich? I used to live in this one gated community and there was no application process or anything. We even had a black guy living there. He moved out after he got tired of people calling the cops on him. LOL. Late but a roommate in college asked if she could get pregnant because and touched her so over the boxers and then showered later and touched her own vagina to wash. Poor girl never had sex ed. I had a Passover Seder at my house with a number of friends, some of whom were Jewish. some of whom were not. When we got to the part of the service where the firstborn son of every Egyptian dies, which is the entire crux of the Passover service, the narrative climax on which the entire story relies, my friend asked if, instead of dying, the firstborn could just catch a really bad cold as it was too upsetting for her. It took 17 years and a restaurant job to teach my friend there are more types of cheese than just yellow cheese that came in pre-packaged slices. American kid raised in ghetto Ohio. During a game of Cards Against Humanity, our intern asked what a clitoris is. She was 22. We convinced her it was a species of dinosaur. Please tell me you are joking about convincing her it was a dinosaur. An online friend claimed that video gamers endure worse things than black people. His argument was that people who commit hate crimes go to jail while people who mock gamers don't. LOL, this is great. I'm imagining his thought process is that a gamer could be harassed, tormented, and then killed in a hate crime against gamers and the perpetrator would get off scot-free. Guy 1. Ugh, my parents are so controlling. Guy 2. Hey man, you should just move out, you're 20. Guy 1. I don't know if my parents would let me. That's actually a huge problem with controlling parents. You feel like they have that power over you and it's hard to escape. Even if you can legally move out, they might harass you for it, or find some way to make it harder. Super religious. Ex. Girlfriend. You orgasm when you masturbate. In all fairness, some women don't because they haven't got their technique down. College roommate was using fabric softener only to wash his clothes for months before I caught on to what he was doing and showed him what detergent was. He was just making his dirty clothes smell better but not actually cleaning them. To be fair, plain water will clean a lot of things, like plain dirt, pretty well. My roommate in university had parents that did everything for him, so he came with no ability to cook. We had to teach him how to make craft dinner. He would just open the box and dump the noodles and cheese in the water and not understand why it wasn't working. He showed no interest in cooking, but we got him to the point where he could make almost any packaged oven meal. Guy lived off chicken fingers. Some college freshmen on the bus. If there's no food in Africa, then why don't the people who live there move somewhere else? But I thought Republicans were the bad guys after being told that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican in a history class. This was a junior in high school. I worked with a girl for a few days because she transferred stores to help out since we had a shortage of workers. She was 23-24 and still lived with her parents. I struck a conversation with her about new movies at that time, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 being one of them. She said she had to sneak out to go watch it with friends and that it was exhilarating. Definitely a what moment. That song Don't Trust Me by 303 was on the radio while I was driving a friend, which includes the line do the Helen Keller and talk with your hips. She took offense, stating that if they wanted to write a song about Helen Keller, they could at least know she signed and spoke with her hands. She is a lot of fun to play with cards with humanity with. She doesn't get 75% of the cards. All references to sex go straight over her head. She grew up very sheltered and very Catholic. In her defense, that's a rubbish euphemism for sex. Police who have encountered sovereign citizens. What's your best story? I work drug interdiction on a major interstate in the southeast and deal with these delusional people much more often than I care to. One story in particular is a young man out of Tennessee that my partner stopped and I arrived to find him refusing to exit his car. My partner is much more patient than I and is trying to reason with the guy, explaining that despite his ambitious arguments that we have no jurisdiction or authority over him, if he doesn't comply and produce identification that he will be arrested. He eventually agrees to step out of the car and I take him off the shoulder of the road and begin to talk with him as my partner starts running checks and doing his enforcement action. The guy didn't produce a license for my partner but did provide a name and DOB that needed up being fictitious. The guy tells me that he is a foreign dignitary from the Israel International Army, is that he is not subject to our state's jurisdiction, and rattles off the typical sovereign BS. He then pulls out a Israel National Army identification card that is hilariously poor quality and starts describing his assigned duties and objectives as an operative for this fictional group of idiots. I notice that the card he has handed me is a little frayed on the edge and the lamination is loose, so I gently lift up on the laminate and reveal that his ID from this group is printed on computer paper and wrapped around an Ingalls Advantage card. I have a good chuckle and we end up arresting the guy for obstruction for providing the false name, as his vehicle is registered in his true name, and our system pops up a nice big picture of the registered owner with their full info. With 10 years of law enforcement experience and countless interactions with these people, I am still fascinated with their level of ignorance and stupidity. Prosecutor, not a cop, but I have seen a couple of these idiots in court. One guy insisted on representing himself despite the judge's constant pleas that he accept a public defender. He submitted documents to the court that were signed with his thumbprint in his own blood. Literally cannot make this up. During jury selection he would ask a question, and then spin around and look at the judge to see if she was going to shut him down. He repeatedly asked said things you can't during jury selection. That whole trial was a train wreck. He testified in his own defense and said he wasn't born in New York like his birth certificate said, but instead in Northwest Africa. So I at least gave him props for getting the direction right if we are including New York as part of Africa. He was on trial for a suspended license and weed, so this was all so much ado about nothing. He got convicted. The second one I saw started out way more reasonable. He did his own jury selection like the other guy, but was way more prepared and seemed like he'd been there before. I was actually pretty impressed for a while, until he testified. So since he was representing himself, he didn't have an attorney to ask him questions when he testified like usual. In these situations, typically the person just gives a monologue about their side of the story. Not this guy. He stood at the podium, asked a question, then walked to the witness stand, sat down, and answered it. Then he got up, went back to the podium, asked a question, rinse, lather, repeat. He seemed fairly normal if a little deluded until that happened, and then we realized he was full on crazy, just better at hiding it. He also got convicted for a suspended license and having a concealed weapon. He carried a huge hunting knife on himself at all times. Not this guy. He stood at the podium, asked a question, then walked to the witness stand, sat down, and answered it. So you actually met Dale Gribble? I'm not police, but I work in local government and we have a few of these people. One in particular routinely sends certified letters stating that the US Constitution does not require her to be a part of the US and that local government can therefore not require her to pay taxes or anything. She routinely sends subpoenas for people to appear in her court to answer for violations of things. The really creepy part is she also puts a thumbprint in blood as her signature. One of my friends considers himself a sovereign citizen. I usually zone out when he's explaining some old maritime law or whatever that makes him exempt from everything he doesn't like. Honestly, nothing's really different between him and my other friends except for the fact that he's got a rap sheet like 3 pages long full of simple trespassing and stuff because you can't own land, man, or whatever the heck. Dealing with sovereign citizens sounds a lot like working in a daycare, which I have done a lot. Lawyer here. I once faced off against one in court. He asked the master of the courts to override the Supreme Court of Canada. When the master wouldn't do that, our Freeman tried to convince him to disbar me, saying that I'm not really an attorney. This was quite funny because in Canada we don't call lawyers attorneys. He later filed an affidavit claiming that he was a former client of mine and thus I was acting in conflict of interest. Crazy. So what I gathered from this is a lot of freemen in Canada probably end up digesting lots of American-based stuff. Not a cop, but I'm a criminal defense attorney, specifically a public defender. I deal with sovereign citizens frequently in my line of work, so I'll share some of my experiences. I've had to represent several sovereign citizens, and they're endlessly hilarious to deal with. My favorite way to cool their jets is to let them finish their anti-government rant, and then say something like this to them. Okay, let's assume for a minute that everything you just told me was correct, which it wasn't, but let's assume anyway. Even if the government has no jurisdiction over you, the fact of the matter is that the judge has a literal personal army of sheriff's deputies that will do whatever he tells them to do. If you resist them, they'll use their jails, their guns, their tasers, their handcuffs, and their batons to help you comply. And, when they're done doing all that to you, absolutely no one will tell the judge that he couldn't have done that. Nobody. So, that said, let's limit our discussion to the rules that the judge wants us to play by, because otherwise he is going to force us to play by them and there's nothing we can do about it. That usually helps bring them back to reality fairly quickly. Since I've represented so many of them, I've also taken the time to read their handbook, titled 4 Flags Says Your Schwag, which is the most nonsense-laden book I've ever read. Not only does it entirely misunderstand and misapply the law, it's also filled with downright falsehoods and lies straight out of its author's imaginary fantasy world. If you want to read it for yourself, you can either pay $25 for it on Amazon, or you can download it for free in .pdf form without paying its author a penny. I suggest the latter, given that he doesn't believe in our government. It stands to reason he doesn't believe in our government's copyright system either. That said, despite the ocean of bulls inside of its pages, there is one section to it that's absolutely true. That part is the section that says you shouldn't have a state licensed attorney represent you because no attorney licensed by the state will give the arguments in that book out of fear of being disbarred. That, my friends, is the only true statement in the book. You get my upvote for the copyright system remark. I am in the UK, and have encountered some in my job in mortgages. I am in the complaints department. We regularly get letters from customers stating obtuse sailing laws from the 18th century that mean that the UK loan system is illegal. Also, we get given a bit of paper that states this document is a bill of you have to legally take this to clear my mortgage. No we don't. We get claims that without providing signed original paperwork, which we don't hold, it's all electronic, the mortgage is invalid. The list goes on. They call themselves Bob of the Family Smith. I just sigh when I see the letters now. My uncle calls himself one, but it's kinda funny because he refuses to work, expects family and the US government to cough up money or housing whenever he gets tired of living under a bridge, and he's super into big government. He just doesn't want to pay the consequences of it. I think he's confused. I had to deal with a few of these as a correctional officer. They'd tell me that it was illegal to hold them in prison, that our write-ups didn't matter, they were generally harmless inside. However, we did have to watch a dashcam video of 2 cops pulling one over, while the cops were arresting the driver. Outstanding warrant. His 12-year-old kid gets out with an AK and kills both cops. I've been very lucky, knock on wood, to not have had to deal with many. I'm currently being sued by a sovereign citizen through an unrecognized as legitimate court, but so is every other person in the 100+ department, so I'm not just real concerned about it. He just decided to sue everybody. Cause it works like that, I guess. Even cops like me, who have never even seen him or knew who he was. The only other time I dealt with one was a very mild interaction in comparison to the ones you see on YouTube. I pulled a guy over for either expired tag or no tag. Can't remember now. I was like a first year rookie. He was very odd throughout the whole thing. Didn't have his license on him. Used some alternate word like convey in place of driving. Like we were conveying to the store. Classic sign of sovereign citizen. When I asked him for his birthday he said, I don't know. So of course I'm like WTF. Yes you do. What is it? He goes, all I know is what I've been told. What? I can't remember anything about the day I was born. All I know is what people have told me. I thought about it for a second and was kind of amused, lol. I was thinking, well crap, what if my mom has been lying to me this whole time about what day I was born on? She totally could have pulled it off. I wouldn't have known any different, lol. It's not like that old worn out birth certificate from the 80s is the most reputable looking document anyway. Joking. Of course. Though I'll never know for sure. I finally had to go the route of asking, okay, fine. When were you told you were born? And he immediately spit out a birthday. That was mostly what I remember from it. I cited him for something and as I'm telling him the ticket information, he kept interrupting me saying thank you just over and over. I finally just said frick it and quit talking. Gave him his ticket and he left. I think he was still a sovereign citizen in training, lol. Oddly enough, This doesn't end terribly. I seem to be in a rare experience. In 2008 I worked a 1-year contract at my then local town's police detachment as an admitting guard, civilian, mostly paperwork, for the jail cells. 95% of the time is drunks to sleep it off. When I was on shift and the cells were empty, small town, I made an effort to clean them, hose them down, use proper cleaning chemicals and set up a mat or two for the next occupants. Around the fall the officers brought in a highway arrest. I can hear the radio chatter from my office and was familiar with the codes by then. The guy was driving an unregistered vehicle, no insurance, no license, multiple warrants out for similar offenses, obstruction of justice, petty crimes, bunch of other minor, moderate things as well as a warning tag that the subject was known for aggression against police. They bring the guy in. He's somewhat uncooperative, but far from the worst I have seen. He placed in one of my freshly cleaned cells, where he promptly sits down. He later requests, politely, a magazine to read, which I provide an older National Geographic. Within a few hours the paperwork is processed. He has read the book, and is fully cooperative. I suspect nothing at this point. The officers draw up the release papers, a promise to appear, which of course we already have an inkling is not going to be followed through on. I prepare the release notes, and then the guy says this to me: I'm a freeman of the land. We don't believe in government. Normally when these guy nods to the officers, take me away, I make a point of causing as much noise, banging and disrupting as much as I can. I didn't do that today, because you gave me a clean cell. You showed me an ounce of respect, so I have to show it back by being cooperative, and now I'm out of here in record time. Thank you. At the time I had never encountered that before. I was floored. The officers were speechless for a moment. I'll never know what was going through that guy's head, and I still can't quite make sense of it, especially as I read all of the disaster stories on this thread about encounters with these people. Keep your cells clean and people will hate you less. Seems pretty normal. I mean, he didn't go into that cell by choice. No one asked him if he wanted to go in there. Yes, his choices put him there, but at least it was clean, as things should be. Clean. Obligatory, not a police officer, but there was a security guard at the gym where I worked out in college who I became friends with. She told me that her grandmother, who was easily over 100 years old, was a sovereign citizen. Her best story was the time she decided to bring grandma with her to the DMV so she could get a new license. She left grandma in the waiting room and went up to the counter, only to smell faint smoke a few minutes later. She turns around and sees her grandmother, this tiny, gnarled black woman who was maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, freaking toking up in the middle of the DMV. A small crowd has formed around her in shock. When the cops show up, she tries to pull the sovereign citizen shtick on them, which doesn't work. The cops, who aren't sure what to do with a pothead so old that she'd probably die on the way to the station, just kick her and the security guard out. Security guard didn't get her license. Another time, the guard decides she's going to go out clubbing and Granny demands that she comes with. While they're out, the guard loses sight of grandma and searches frantically for her in this dark, loud bar. Eventually, she encounters a guy who says that Granny and his friend went to the motel across the street. The security guard tracks them down and finds out her grandma is soliciting this 20-year-old guy for sex and offers to pay him $100 and weed in the lobby of the motel. The motel owner calls the cops, who show up completely bewildered at the situation. Again, no arrests are made. The security guard just takes grandma home. Yeah. She sounds less like a sovereign citizen and more like someone who is too old to give a frick about anything. Ada here. Had one try to explain to me that we couldn't charge him with a suspended license because reasons and boats and whatnot. He went on for a good 20 minutes about how the government didn't have the right to license him as a free human being and his right to interstate travel. There was also something about his right to wear a hat in court because he was a free man, and I have no idea. I stopped listening because I was laughing too loudly. I told him I'd drop the license charge, but he was driving on US government roads so he would need to plead guilty to the blowing past a stop sign, which was more expensive and carried points on his insurance. And we had on camera. He took the license charge. Because reasons and boats and whatnot. That's a pleasingly concise summation of the general soft sit position and gives it all the respect it is due. I was a guard at a suburban county jail and the patrolmen brought in a sovereign citizen prisoner. I can't remember what the charge was, but I think it was weapon violations. Oh, and the guy was well into his 60s or 70s. I remember he refused to acknowledge the laws of the state or the county because of the stuff he did, like refused to sign any papers or answer any direct questions. He couldn't officially be booked. And since he couldn't be booked, technically he couldn't be given clothes or food, but the sheriff and mayor made sure he was fed and clothed. Otherwise he was denied all other rights and privileges other prisoners would receive, like mail, phone call, commissary purchases and eventually visits. The sheriff allowed his wife to visit him in hopes she'd talk some sense into him, but when it became clear that he enjoyed the attention and notoriety he was getting in the local and state press and among other sovereign citizen groups by continuing to be obtuse, his visits were cut off, and all his crap also kept him from going before a judge. So he sat in an isolated cell with no books, television or contact with the outside world for at least a month, maybe more. I left the department before his situation was resolved. The craziest thing is that if he had just played ball, he would have never been jailed. He would have been booked, sat in a holding cell for a few hours, seen a judge and been released on bail or maybe even his own recognizance. Instead he was jailed indefinitely, and I had the displeasure of interacting with him a couple of times and he was a squilly nut job. Police here, verified on our Protect and Serve. I've never encountered a full-blown sovereign citizen, but a lot of people act like they are until they find out they are getting handcuffs and a trip to jail if they cannot satisfactorily identify themselves. Quite a few people have had success in the past pulling those moves and the cop going, "I'm not dealing with this today," and going free, so they make the gamble. Those cops just make it harder for the rest of us. I would just tell them, if you don't identify yourself with the state issued DL, then you cannot drive on the state maintained roads and highways that everyone, the taxpayers, pay for. You can however try to lobby, permit, fund, construct, and maintain your own roads. Try that. Maybe that'll get him to shut up real quick. Not an officer, but I work in a court. Had a guy convinced that I, personally, would be coming to arrest him, as if I, an office drone, also pulled duty as a bounty hunter or something. I just worked in a courthouse and do data entry all day. You should have told him that he was worthless to you dead. Law enforcement professional who was part of a team that investigated a group of sovereign citizens, SE, who were being investigated for insurance fraud. They were openly advertising via internet, newspaper advertising, and flyers for financial responsibility for your conveyance. In other words, car insurance. They advertised it as a legal viable option to skirt the state and federal insurance laws. The SC would pay into the financial responsibility for your conveyance a monthly fee, much like we all do for our vehicle insurance. The system was sorta quietly working for them for small stuff, but all heck broke loose when one of their members was involved in a DUI accident that killed someone. He told law enforcement and the courts he had insurance, and he produced his cute little financial responsibility for your conveyance card. Yes, they produced cards for proof that members would put in their glove box. This opened the investigation I ended up working on. The SCs offering the financial responsibility were not licensed to sell insurance, among other things. They were arrested and charged with insurance fraud, wire fraud, and mail fraud. Work for a city. Sovereign guy lives on a corner lot. One side has sidewalk, one doesn't. For you that don't know, the public right-of-way usually ends 12-15 feet from the back of curb and is owned by the city. This guy doesn't mow the section of grass between the curb and sidewalk because he says it's the city's and it's our responsibility. We get complaints on it and go mow it a couple times and charge him. When it's about to go on his taxes, he shows up to council and has an even crazier friend talk for him while he live streams the meeting that is already being live streamed. His friend states making him mow that section of lawn is indentured servitude, and asked if a property abuts City Hall, can the city make the owners come in and scrub toilets? Never mind the fact that this guy has two sections of right of way and mows one but not the other, and we've told him this repeatedly. He signed his objection with a smiley face. Afterwards we Google him and he and his crazier friend have a history of moving into properties and racking up utility fees and other fees that get assessed back to the property and don't follow the user. They leave and the new owner or landlord is stuck with them. Being a sovereign citizen is just another term for shitbags who try to game the system. Yeah, my house had $118 racked up on the electric bill, which sucks because when you're moving, you're usually trying to save every penny for whatever. Not as bad as others I've seen, but definitely ruined my budget a bit. Not an officer, but I encountered one of these in China. The guy was trying to convince some Chinese at a bar that capitalism is all the rage and that the Chinese government was fascist. As anyone with half a brain knows, the Chinese government doesn't allow freedom of speech. Hearing him go off about being a sovereign citizen was hilarious, especially since all the Chinese around had no clue what he was even going on about, since it's such an American thing. Chinese at a bar that capitalism is all the rage and that the Chinese government was fascist. As an American, I have been saying this for years. Are these people uniquely American? I'm European, and I've never heard of this behavior before. Not a cop, but my old firm rep the banks that they owed money to. Their arguments were so awful you couldn't even respond to their 3,000-page motions that they filed in a court they utilized and abused, which just so happens to be ran by a government. Don't get me frickin' started. UK. I served a court-signed warrant on one. That was interesting. He believed that because he didn't consent to my bit of paper, that it was powerless. As per process, I called in the police for assistance and stood back and watched the crap show. The guy was screaming and bawling that the court cannot sign something against him without his consent and that I was breaking and entering an open shop, and believed he was totally in the right to shove my colleague aside to stop him working. The cop was absolutely baffled at his logic and spent about half an hour trying to explain the rights of the warrant. Customers were coming and going this entire time and there was quite a scene building up. Eventually the cop just arrested the guy and sat him in the back of the car to let us get on. Had a few of the shop guy's customers' friends come along and tell us what they thought of our warrant. Also a woman tell us what she thought of feminism and how it was a bad thing and that I must be a lesbian for doing men's work. But that's another story. I used to work in the garnishments controller's office for LA City, and there was a senior ranking police officer claiming to be a sovereign citizen and didn't need to pay taxes. Well, the IRS garnished their wages. They argued that they didn't have the right to garnish since a sovereign citizen didn't belong to the US. It was sad that they didn't realize that taxes paid for their high salary. I mention it because it's a matter of public record since my name and apartment was named in a lawsuit, but the city attorney saw to it as we were only doing our jobs. Needless to say, the back taxes are currently being paid by that individual. I never understood their logic. Taxes are how you're paid. How do you not expect to pay any in turn? Not a police officer myself, but my mate is, and he was doing the speed gun thing one shift. And this might be boring, but I liked it. He caught a guy speeding and stopped him. The driver starts playing the whole "is that gun a calibrated device? Was anyone harmed? Is there a victim shite?" My mate simply told him that they would not be changing the laws by discussing it at the roadside, but he was free to contest it through the appropriate legal channels. But right now, sir, you were doing 44 miles per hour on a 30 mile per hour road in wet conditions past a school at 3:30 p.m. I've seen children killed because of people doing what you've just done. Grow up and slow down. And then gave him the fine. After the economic crisis that shook the US in 2008, newspapers and TV reported that squatters, thugs calling themselves sovereign citizens, would break into vacant rentals, properties for sale, and especially foreclosed houses. They moved in and claimed ownership. Once discovered and reported to the police, it was a challenge to catch everyone involved, and the properties were often damaged extensively. I despise the banking industry and stock market, but I do feel bad for the individual homeowners affected. Here's what I don't understand. If a sovereign citizen claims not to be a citizen of a country, and their presence in that country has not been legally authorized, why doesn't immigration law dictate they be deported? It seems like a quick, easy solution. Call it the GTFO law. The frick is a sovereign citizen? One sovereign had a court case. I forget what it was for, but on a previous appearance he and his buddies had been taking pictures of people inside the courtroom. Big no. So we set up a table outside the courtroom the morning of his case. Anyone going in had to voucher their cell phone. Sovereign refused to voucher his phone for reasons, and therefore we wouldn't let him in the courtroom. Judge caught wind of the situation. Since he wouldn't appear in the courtroom, She had the case called and issued a bench warrant for failure to appear. Officers went from inside the courtroom to the hallway and arrested him right there. He spent the rest of his case incarcerated. A local guy is constantly camped out downtown in our small town with all kinds of handwritten and misspelled signs stating his grievances with the town government and various people. I've also seen him at select men's meetings. They are patient only up to a certain point and then it's "Ray, are you going to waste our time tonight?" Then of course he does, so they say enough is enough and shut him down. Fellas, what's not as attractive or sexy as women think it is? Basically any intentional misdirection, like playing games, hard to get, only hinting towards feelings, never saying anything, etc. Like I don't think I've ever looked at someone and went, "Oh, they can't communicate at all. God, I wanna date them." I had a friend like that. She basically thought that men had to fight for her. Whenever she dated someone she made a point of pushing them away at least once and then expected the guy to chase after her and prove he was really into her. It was all, "If he really likes me he'll come back." Girl, if you really liked him you wouldn't play that game. Intentionally difficult to read signals of interest. I don't consider myself dumb at all, but I'm no genius either. If it feels like I'm trying to decode hieroglyphs with you, I'm probably gonna give up. I chased someone for months. We did manage a hot date or two and then I was ghosted. I tried and tried, but nothing. I later got married and when we did finally catch up she told me I was always here, like I gave up. The mind. It boggles. When they think being crazy is like a positive or attractive thing. Like, yeah, I punch my boyfriend if he doesn't pay attention to me, I'm quirky, lol. Like, no, you're just toxic. Abuse isn't funny when women do it, and I wish we'd quit normalizing it. Granted, we're getting better. Like when Cardigan talked about how crazy she was, like it was a joke and not an abusive relationship. Do unto others, man. Cardigan had me in sticks. Thank you. My current girlfriend would purposely bring conversations to a dead end to see if I would keep talking to her and bring up new topics. She was interested in me and was trying to find out if I was too by continuing to talk to her. However, it came off as she is not at all interested in me and did not want to continue talking to me. Please don't do this to anyone ever. This sounds like something you'd read in a Cosmo article. 15 ways to see if he really likes you. Being anything other than genuine. It's really hard to do, since we're all scared that if we let people see our true selves, they won't like us. But the truth is that the true you is the most beautiful you. Dang, that's refreshing. I put my true self out there to my ex, but he was certain I was exactly like all his exes. Like, no, this is me. See me for who I am, not who you're afraid I'll be, was the biggest thing that was in our way. He carried that baggage with him like a loaded mule. Playing hard to get. Man, I absolutely hate that and I know many agree with me. Hard to get makes you hard to want. Don't compare us to an ex. Even if we have a bigger dong, you're just building paranoia that we're constantly being compared to someone else. I want to be thought of as wonderful on my own terms in a unique way to them. Being ultra dramatic up and down. To be fair, I think this works when young women do it with young guys. It draws them in. But as guys emotionally mature and figure out what they want out of life, it becomes more of a red flag than a manic pixie dream girl situation. The female equivalent of the bad boy. Sounds emotionally draining. The Kardashian look. Pumped up lips and a disproportionately large butt are a huge turn off for me. It's just not natural. All the other Kims with the pumped up lips better run. The duck face look and almost all lip enhancements like injections. It looks like you're having an allergic reaction and I feel like I need to get you some Benadryl. I have a cleft lip and didn't think twice about your comment before I got to the edit. My takeaway from reading a bunch of comments: don't hide who you are. Plastic surgery, fake voices, unclear intentions, desires are all very unattractive. Just be honest with who you are and what you want. Oh, you forgot the realest advice. Let yourself be vulnerable. A good prospective partner won't punish you for it, and it can establish that feeling of connection people want. Playing hard to get is annoying. especially when she's given signals that couldn't even be picked up by NASA. I don't want to be too pushy either, so I can't tell if she wants me to stop or to ask her out. Just let us know. You don't have to flat out tell us, but be risky with the hints. In a world where it's increasingly unacceptable for men to make women feel uncomfortable, if I think there is even a 2% chance she is not into me, then I'm out. It's very easy to make someone uncomfortable if you think they are into you but they aren't. So if she plays hard to get, I'm not taking chances. I need to know for sure whether she is into me or not. Being a bad bee. Like basically being someone who loves starting crap and having problems with other people, especially other girls. Having enemies and acting all hard isn't cute. Girls being toxically controlling and overbearing. Like a girl not letting her BF have any time to himself and always have to know what he's doing. And then when you try to see what she's doing, she blows up in your face. Why do girls think that makes them look cute? I did this crap with my ex. I didn't do it to look cute. I'm a guy BTW. After we had broken up and I had really worked to better myself, I really just realized that most of the crap I did was from my own insecurities and I didn't even really think of it when it was all happening. Uncomfortable shoes. I hope you feel attractive and sexy in them, because wow, it's painful to watch you hobble and struggle through the car park. You fricking leave my clown shoes out of this. That fake surprise. When it seems like they're completely astonished to see you, you could just say hi instead of "What are you doing in my house?" When a woman tries to sit on a boner to tease you, to me it just hurts when she sits on it if it's tucked away into my pants. Sit on her boobs to return the favor. Drawn on eyebrows. Makeup as a whole is fine, but shaving off your eyebrows just to draw them on just turns me off. My cousin draws her eyebrows too high. When I told her, she looked surprised. For me, it's not about motivation. It's not wanting to be anything remotely like Harvey Weinstein combined with a general level of obliviousness that's tied to my lack of belief that anyone would be remotely interested. It's a mighty powerful combination. I definitely agree with that first part. I don't want to become that creep that can't take no for an answer. If a girl shows me in any way that she isn't interested, I am not going to keep trying. Honestly, anyone that plays hard to get is childish, so not much of a loss. I had a coworker complain to me that guys don't pay her any attention, don't chase her or put forth any effort, etc. Went out with her one night and she was playing games with these guys. Hard to get was putting it nicely. We're now in a no means no dating world. You're telling guys no and you're irritated BC they actually listen, WTF. This. Any sensible guy has been ingrained with the no means no, so we give up at the first sign of hesitation, be it games or not, cause we've been taught to be ultra respectful, not flirty. I almost missed out on the chance to tell the girl I care about how I actually felt. She's someone overseas I met in an online MMO and she had already been approached by a few guys who seemed to think she was interested just because she talked to them. She typically had bad interactions with them, especially one bloke who didn't seem to take no for a proper answer. I racked my brain for ages trying to figure out whether she talks to me just because I'm a friend or if it was something more. I decided to not pursue in order to not come off like those other desperate guys and keep her friendship. I then proceeded to miss a ton of clear "I like you" messages from her, like compliments, special attention. Heck, I even got a funny Valentine's card from her and just laughed it off as haha, that's pretty good. Remained oblivious for over 2 years until I had a drunk Discord call with her where she blurted out how she felt after having given up on me for a while. Confessed back to her, with a tad bit of Dutch courage, sometime later, and I'll hopefully be visiting her once these COVID lockdowns calm down. Moral of the story is, give it a shot cause you never really know for sure how someone feels about you. A year or so ago I made a move on a friend of mine. Just a direct question. She said no, so of course I dropped it. She was impressed, as though it was some sign that I'm a really good dude. Just reminds me of this one comedian who pointed out, really? That's how low we've set the bar? I'm pretty sure the alternative is a felony. The comedian is Sam Morrill. He's been hot lately. His most recent special was released on YouTube for free. Playing hard to get is one of the worst things anyone can do, as it totally undermines the mentality of no means no and replaces it with no means try harder, when no can sometimes mean yes. Suddenly there's room for misinterpretation. In short, saying no means try harder for you personally isn't just about you personally. Underrated comment right there. Being respectful of women, I'm going to immediately take aloofness. Hard to get or negging as straight up rejection. Maybe jerks and narcissists often get with desirable women because they don't give up. My years of bullying as a child taught me to believe that if a woman is making it easy for me, then it's either a practical joke of some kind or she wants something specific from me. In middle school, a girl came up to me all smiling and stuff and asked me if I wanted to go out with her. She was really cute, so I was thinking that it had to be a joke. Found out about 10 years later she was serious. I was still in school and one day the popular pretty girl started talking to me about Dungeons and Dragons. I was puzzled, but it was nice to receive some attention and apparent interest in the game. Turns out her being nice was a decoy to allow another girl to stick an insulting note about me on my back. Same, I distrust almost anyone being nice to me in general. Always waiting for the other shoe to drop is no fun. My last ex told me when we were getting together, dude, I am broken as frick. I was like, frick, so am I, even though I don't just come out and say, listen, boys and girls, if they warn your butt ahead of time, you freaking believe them. Also, I'm almost through dating witches. The last two took a troubled heart and they fricked it to pieces. If the next witch girl I date breaks my heart, I'm done. Like 90% sure this time. I learned the hard way. My ex told me her ex said she's crazy and I dismissed it. Was probably a clear warning what I was about to get myself into. Looking back, the if you can't handle me at my worst saying is basically a nicer way of saying I accept you to tolerate all my butthole behavior on the off chance I might be semi-tolerable for a few hours. I struggle with this because I think there's a grain of truth. Even a very healthy relationship will have some kind of rough times, and if you bail the moment things get tough, you're in butt waffle. But that's not how people use this quote. It's used as an excuse to opt out of any self-control or consideration of how one person's actions affect others. The idea is that my best cancels out my worst. But that's not how relationships work. You don't undo bad behavior with good behavior. In a healthy relationship, you're obligated to make all possible efforts to be as shitty as possible at all times. Ghosting a man, or woman, or other, when you're in a relationship or dating. It's not fun when they do it to you. It's not fun when you do it to them. You're not playing hard to get. You're just telling the person you like that they're not important enough to get back to in a timely manner. If you're busy, that's cool. If you don't want to talk, that's cool too. If you're not as interested as we are, sucks but a-okay. Just say so. Same goes for one-word replies, especially when you're miffed. We're notoriously bad mind readers, and the only difference between us is that most of the time we won't question you. We'll just feel badly. Also, remember that people can see when you're typing. How I Met Your Mother has a term for this. On the hook. When you're keeping someone on your hook, you're just keeping them around because it makes you feel good knowing you always have that one person to fall back on, even though you personally don't, and never will, have any romantic feelings for this person. My first girlfriend and her mom always accidentally called me by her ex's name for the first 5 months of our relationship. I broke up with her after 6 months together. She was my first GF. I already had low self-confidence, was trying to figure out the whole dating thing, and they made me question if I was just a replacement for the ex. We both looked alike apparently. Unfortunately, 13 years later, I was 16 then, now I'm 29. I still haven't been in a good relationship. Maybe it was a sign for what my future romantic life would hold. It takes some of us longer than others to find a person with whom we can really connect. I've been with my girlfriend for a year now, which is my second longest relationship, and it is the first time that I understand how an awesome relationship feels. I just turned 40. I hope you come across a good relationship sooner than that, but if not, it's totally worth the wait. Don't fake interest in my interests. If you don't like football or video games, just say so. I couldn't give two shoots about steam trains and trains in general, except to notice that some of them look neat. My husband is obsessed with them. What do I do? I point out trains wherever we go because I know he will want to watch. I send him random trains that come up in memes. I am looking for a cross-stitch pattern to stitch for him of a steam train. I'm helping him build a goddamned 5x9 layout in our basement and just hung 6 shelves for him to display part of his collection. Do I care about trains? Number. But I love my husband and want to see him happy and have fun with his hobbies. Do I let him play train videos late at night with sound on? Number. He knows better. My hobbies are a bit quieter, but he also will send me memes about art and look at cross-stitch patterns with me. And I have successfully gotten him into multiple book series and Welcome to Night Vale. Face with tears of joy. I'm basically agreeing with you and just pointing out that there are lots of ways to be aware of and encourage your so's interests, but not pretend like you are a fan of them. Most of the other ones in this thread are agreed on by most guys. Most guys don't like women playing hard to get with the baby talk stuff or bad plastic surgery, but this one stands out. In V think a lot more people get turned on by sounds and dirty talk than you might think. At least I do. Yeah, there's a point at which it's more annoying or just bad, but I'd rather women err on the side of talking moaning too much as opposed to too little. I usually just stick with saying your dong feels so good and variations of that. That gets me going a lot. Like I'm the reason you're getting off and that is ridiculously sexy. I guess when they say it's so big I don't believe them and then think they're bullshitting me because they think I need that lol. Sex is a mind freak. Elder millennials. What stereotype aggravates you the most? I hate that millennials get pinned as being addicted to their phones. Like, always behind a screen and not interacting with the real world. I for one try really hard to have good phone etiquette, and what I've noticed is, boomers can be really bad at this. Some of the older people in my office and family are the worst offenders when it comes to texting at the table or just checking out on social media. Every time my husband and I are at the airport we talk about this. Every boomer there is glued to their phone that weird way they look down at it but also up somehow tapping away at some mindless game. Often with the sound on. The sound on boomers kill me. That we don't take our jobs seriously. I had to sit my peer, 55 plus, down and tell him that the millennials he was bitching about were the same age as the very qualified and mission focused person he's been working with for the past decade. We're upper management. Me and colleague in story specifically, not a generalization on millennials. To clarify, the stereotype that a lot of millennials are struggling with money because they're lazy and entitled is ridiculous. Look at the average wage versus the cost of rent, healthcare, and higher education now versus what it was a few decades ago. Boomers had it far easier than we did, but act like our generation's struggles just boil down to a lack of hard work. Also, the participation trophy meme, aside from being largely bulls anyway, raises the question, whose generation was giving out the participation trophies? Why would you blame the kids who received them? Seriously, it's like, have you ever thought that the reason you gave us participation trophies was because you were too lazy to work with your kids when they failed at something? Like many, I am working from home. I'll get a call from my mom, hey, you are not working now, go do something for me. Thanks, working from home is why I shitter than going to real work. At least for me, I do fit the stereotype of hating talking on the phone. I work primarily at night. One of my jobs I generally get out at midnight. The other more like 4 AM. My mom acts like I don't have a job. The most ridiculous thing is she babysits my daughter overnight when I work. When we are looked down upon for needing to use YouTube, etc. For learning tasks, for example, changing a tire, that our parents were taught by our grandparents, but the former never took the time to teach us. I'm getting really tired of hearing about us lying around expecting handouts and not working, especially when it's a situation where the person saying it is standing in a room with a lot of millennials, all of whom have jobs, which is every single time I've heard this said in real life. Like, who here is lying around doing nothing? Who's your example? Oh, it's your neighbor's best friend's cousin's son. He doesn't have a job and lies on the couch all day. Okay. A lot of millennials I know have multiple jobs, including monetizing their hobbies, and still just barely getting by. As an American, It's basically that we're inheriting a system that nobody trusts us to run. All the people who represent us are 2-3 times older than us. The older generations are refusing or unable to retire, which is preventing us from actually entering the job market. We currently have the most geriatric Congress in US history. The boomers refuse to concede power and continue to be elected as they still have sheer numbers on X, Y, and Z. That however will change by 2024 with a relatively even amount, and by 2028 most boomers will be too feeble or will have passed away to be able to make it to the polls. We can't afford houses because apparently we spend too much on avocado toast. No, in the 80s and 90s houses were about 3 to 4 times the average annual income. Now it's close to 10, at least in my part of the world. My dad bought a house in an inner Melbourne suburb in the 70s for $90,000. It's valued today at over $2 million. He bought it on about 3 years worth of wages, with no university debt. I have 2 degrees, work full time, and I couldn't even buy a crappy 1-bedroom apartment with 6 years worth of wages, let alone a house on 3. When someone makes mention of some challenge teenagers are doing like eating Tide Pods and people are like, ugh, millennials. No, just because 4 or 5 people did something stupid and then the news decided to take it and run with it and make it sound way more widespread than it is, doesn't mean you get to generalize a whole generation. Secondly, millennials are practically the age of the parents of the TikTok generation. It's not a generic term for any young person doing something you don't like. The Tide Pod one makes me so angry. That we're entitled. Having worked with the general public for over a decade, I can assure you the overwhelming majority of entitled and rude behavior comes from the over 50s crowd. Stop wasting money going out to eat and be financially responsible. Millennials are killing the crappy restaurant industry. OMG. That people don't own a house because they're lazy. I have taken the time to explain the loss of buying power, stagnant wages, automation, contract employees, lack of job security, cost of living in other areas, etc. Play way more into it. That we don't work hard. We're the most overworked and underpaid generation. I have a bachelor's and master's and $30k of debt, and I worked 2 jobs while in school and couldn't afford to pay for it. I've been busting my butt for a decade, making $10 to $13 an hour, working over 40 hours a week, no benefits, and the younger generation can suck my dong for claiming we aren't radical enough. For the love of God, we are simply trying to survive. Ugh, this speaks to my soul. We are what the previous generation made us, and we have been shaped by the world we were raised in, and then we are attacked for who we've been perceived to become as a result. It's like getting angry at the puddle of milk because you threw the carton on the floor. I just shoveled like 20 of my elderly neighbors' driveways this morning after snowpocalypse. By Wednesday, while chatting they'll talk about those lazy millennials like they're still 20-year-olds. Bro, I'm 38 and got 4 kids and own the biggest house of this block. I'm millennial. Cannot convince them of this, ever. They'll just hit you with, well, you're just one of the good ones, or wish more of them were like you. Participation trophies. These were for our boomer parents, not for us, and now we are blamed by them for being entitled because we got them. Definitely freaking hate the concept of participation trophies. I've gotten into a shouting match with an older guy over them before. I was 10, your generation was the one handing them out, dipshit. It really pisses me off how older generations constantly perpetuate the idea that millennials have no manners and are just inherently crappy and rude. I have worked in retail, a call center, and social services for my entire working life, so I have communicated with a lot of different people from all age groups and all walks of life. Without a doubt, there is an absolute and distinct difference in manners between millennials and folks from older generations. Of course, I can't paint everyone with a broad brush, but if I had to list the 100 most entitled, batshit crazy, unbelievably rude people I have ever spoken to, maybe only 10 of them would be millennials. You must go to college and get a degree. You don't want to be flipping burgers or changing the oil in some rich guy's car. Does that? Incurs a lot of debt. These irresponsible millennials and their elitist liberal educations. If they'd been smart, they'd go to community college and go to trade school. They won't just take a job, any job to pay the bills. They could flip burgers. Why should we pay for their mistakes? I was talking about this with my dad the other day and he was like, we didn't force you to go to college. Nobody straight up said I had to go to college, but they did spend an awful lot of time talking about how only fuck ups don't go to college and making sure that entry level jobs required a degree. Being blamed for not buying things, like, millennials are killing X product line. Welp, the boomers who won't retire are clinging to the top level jobs, so we don't have the opportunities they did to move up and earn more money, so we have to be choosy about the things we spend our money on. Not to mention, most of us are trying to be mindful of our consumerism as a whole, not buying tons of stuff for the sake of having tons of stuff. The consumerism thing is tricky for them to understand. My in-laws are downsizing, and they keep asking if we want this. Decorative plates and candy dishes mostly, but also every single toy my husband ever had growing up. They get offended when, no, we don't want junk to keep in the garage. They also get offended if we accept a decorative plate with the intent of actually using it as a plate. The two stereotypes that irk me the most are, 1. We don't work hard enough and want handouts. Since high school I've worked all kinds of jobs. Restaurants, retail, I dabbled in construction while pursuing a trade, I've been to college, etc. And I still feel like I'm never going to have the lives my grandparents have. The cost of living just isn't the same and I feel like every time I get a foothold on things the goalpost gets pushed back. I'm not lazy, I'm just tired of trying so dang hard. I don't want handouts. I just want the tax dollars I pay to benefit me. These people are out of touch. 2. We're soft, over-emotional snowflakes. While working all these jobs the past 16 years I've seen folks my parents' age explode at Walmart, calling employees cocksuckers, because they weren't helped soon enough. I've seen grown men, 40 plus years old, almost come to blows on a construction site over minor disagreements. I've seen boomers struggle to take advice from younger folks in their field despite the younger folks having the most up-to-date strategies. Too set in their ways, I've seen them be and moan over societal changes that don't affect them at all. I've seen how moody the older generations can be. Don't act like my generation is a bunch of emotional crybabies when you're in your office having a freakout because you can't get your digital calendar to work right. The lack of respect we get really. Older generations getting upset that we are starting to get into politics at the national level. You'll realize we are in our mid-late 30s now, right? And we straddle the cultural divide. We grew up without the internet and cell phones. Sure, the more well-off amongst us had a computer and internet maybe by the mid-90s, but the younger generation can't grasp how different it was. We spent our formative years with a budding technology and a lot of us figured it out and embraced it. So, why shouldn't we be the ones who are helping to move us forward? We see both ends, the magic of it because of how new it was and how ever-changing. And we also know how to fix things. We started with command lines and Unix, Ataris and Nintendos, chat rooms, Ike, some of the first online multiplayer games. Thank you Half-Life and Quake. But we also grew up being able to go outside with friends all day without anyone worrying about us. We were the last generation to get that experience. When millennials do crap that Gen Zers and boomers did, but for some reason we get derided as the shittiest generation to ever get whelped. When millennials take cooking classes and sewing classes and basic auto repair classes, and other crap our parents were too busy to teach us. But no one ever talks about that part. We're derided as being helpless and needing adulting classes. When Gen Xers and boomers did literally exactly the same thing. It was celebrated at self-improvement and the American dream and called taking a class down at the while earning an ex-community college. 1981 here. The stereotypes are amazing. Every time I hear an insult aimed at millennials I'm amazed and amused that anyone thought it was an insult. An entire demographic dedicated to making sure everyone is doing something they believe in, that we all get the support we need, and putting Applebee's out of business. I'm honored to be counted among them on a technicality. When all the college kids were out partying during the pandemic were called millennials. That was Gen Z. I had family blaming my generation for this crap. I'm a younger millennial, 1 year shy of being a zoomer. It was both, I promise you, and I hate it. Boomers too, of course, not parties but BBQs, vacations, restaurants, There are some really crappy people in all age groups. Don't just blame the younger people like a lot of boomers did to us. I kinda laugh when boomers call us snowflakes when they seem like the bigger bunch of wimps in history. Anytime they get a taste of their own medicine they act like it's an assault on their freedom. I'm 31. I played golf with my father around Christmas. Before I got fired he asked how my job was going. I said it was okay, stressful, and they were giving me more responsibility. He asked if they were gonna pay me more, and I just laughed for a good few minutes. He had a bewildered look and said, well, that's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? You need to stand up for yourself and demand more money. I seriously looked at him and asked where he's been the last 20 years. Employers don't like your tone of voice. They kick you to the curb and get someone else willing to be their robot and be programmed to how they demand you act and carry out tasks. That I am an entitled, unwilling, undriven individual who has no interest in having children, saving for my future, getting married, or buying a home. This irritates me the most because I am married with 2 kids, home-owning, business owner, with a home that I pay the mortgage on. Evidently, that doesn't actually matter, however, because if I ever end up being correct about anything, I am really just young and naive and can be ignored. I am 33. Even if you didn't have those things, I always wanted all those things too, but the world wasn't set up in a way that it could happen for me at 22 like the boomers. We got blamed for spring break covered outbreaks. We aren't in college anymore. Haha, I remember that. My favorite response was something like, we are too old for spring break. We're at home with our kids struggling through virtual learning and trying to convince our parents to stay home from church. Frick. Born in 1985. Here, and my biggest irritation is that so many boomers refuse to retire. I get that some are unable to, but many more can, yet won't. Get off the goddamned pot and let the rest of US crap, please. Bunch of these can't retire because they spent way above their means their entire lives, so don't feel too badly for that group either. So I'm 33, millennial age, right, and I deliver pizza. I have 2 co-workers who are both 66. If I ever don't get a tip, I just shrug it off. It hardly ever happens, and it's not required. When either of them don't get a tip, they throw freaking pissy fits. I don't hear the end of it, so I just think it's funny that my generation is the one seen as entitled. Being mocked for not liking to answer the doorbell when you're not expecting someone. Thanks guys, but we've had stalkers, and furthermore you're probably giving away all your retirement to a Nigerian prince as we speak. My parents are on the early end of Gen X, 66, and I tend to be on the lower end of the millennial generation depending on which sources you look at, 90. I constantly remind them that I am a millennial and I have been part of the workforce for a decade now. Millennials are not some spring chickens with zero work experience demanding upper management salaries. We're people who have been working 10-20 years now demanding an actual COLA. That we're snowflakes. Baby boomers can't hear the word boomer without screaming bloody murder, and they can't handle being told they might be wrong about anything without throwing a hussy fit, but they shitty on us constantly about some perceived sensitivity. The whole lazy crap. Most of my friends or peers are so overworked they barely have free time, and even when they do have free time, they are so burnt out many of them are seriously depressed and disassociate because the amount of effort put in is not equal to the value given back. This crap is not how our species is supposed to live, and we are the generation really seeing that contrast and waking up from the perpetual motion machine everyone has been asleep to. We were born into a system that was broken and we realize this. Boomers have very little concept of money as it relates to today's climate, because they were able to get a 2-bedroom in the 70s for like $250 while working at Walgreens. It's like 2 different realities. Millennials don't know how to. Please be. I rewired a rotary phone and washed cat pee out of my grandmother's 28.8 kbps modem. Older millennials had analog childhoods and digital adolescence. We can do nearly frick all anything and expect the world to radically change every 10 years maximum. Sorry we killed the diamond ring luxury hat blacksmithing plastic straw industry. Maybe you should have paid us reasonable wages and not crashed the housing market right as we graduated college. being blamed for all the crap Gen Z does or being treated like a 12-year-old. I'm almost 30 and I don't know what the frick the kids are doing either. That I am lazy and entitled. 60 hours a week logging while middle class boomers take 2-hour lunch breaks and take a half day off for golf. And the middle class boomers are only working to get the rest of their pension, which you won't get because you're not grandfathered into the old retirement benefits. Oh, you millennial kids just want trophies for everything. Bruh, I was 6. You were the parents who organized the league, made it so no one kept score, and ordered, bought, and handed out the trophies. We had literally no part in you living out the fantasy that your kid was good at something. You lived vicariously through us, then blamed us for the results of your shifty decisions. Not a millennial. Raised one. So sick of people who spent their 20s and 30s smoking, saying my kid is a spendthrift because they buy a $4 coffee every day to get them through their 5th 12-hour shift. I did some math. In my area, giving up a $4 coffee will generate $1,460 a year and allow you to put a down payment on a house in only 137 years, assuming home prices remain flat. I'm so tired of the lazy comments. I have a Gen X friend who owns a business. She never misses an opportunity to crap on her millennial workers and can't seem to hire or keep good workers. Asked what she's paying, of course it's minimum wage. She refuses to accept this is the problem with getting and retaining good staff. Also, she is wealthy, like out of touch wealthy. It's just so obvious that calling an entire generation group lazy is just a narcissistic way to avoid ever having to examine your own flaws or necessary changes growth as a person. Millennials being freewheeling, emotionally fragile art students who are forever poor and can't perform basic adult responsibilities. I guess that's 5 stereotypes, but they're all aggravating. That it is our fault businesses fail and not the fault of bad business. We didn't ruin a certain industry. That industry failed because it didn't find a way to adapt to change. I have worked hard, gotten lucky, and bought a house. I am saving money for retirement. I have 2 kids, a wife, a good career. I know I'm not the normal picture of a millennial, but I'm still a millennial. Here's the thing. I am the picture of the person the boomers wish millennials were, and they are still wrong. I'm not the norm for a reason. I got lucky, but most millennials haven't been so lucky. Generational averages and norms are not universal definitions, and snapping me to your minimized view is just lazy. The whole lazy refuse to work theme. While we were signing the papers buying our house, there were crap talking millennials saying then typical lazy and living in their parents' basement nonsense, and were totally oblivious to the fact the house was being bought by millennials. The wife was a former teacher and husband worked retail, so also were oblivious to the fact millennials in those same jobs now would not be able to afford said house. God, I relate to this so much. We bought a house for more than twice what the last owners, Gen X, paid for it 15 years ago. They did absolutely zero maintenance on it and had a toilet and shower leaking into the floor for the last decade. So we've been redoing the bathrooms thanks to YouTube. But yeah, we're totally lazy people who refuse to work, and that's why we're broke, I'm sure. I am 31, born in 89, and was told, okay boomer, by a crappy little 14-16-year-old kid in a school uniform. Never wanted to strike a child so much in my life. Little frick tried to cut in line. I asked him what he was doing. The frick you doing, kid? Back of the line. Okay boomer. Should have just yeeted him right there and then. Ironically, boomers were like the first generation where openly defying elders became kind of acceptable. Imagine some boomer twerp disrespecting old man Johnson at his corner store. He would have gotten whipped first by Johnson and then by boomer's dad. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.